Hello, we are so glad that you are here to join us tonight to learn more about the Doctor of Ministry program at Union Presbyterian Seminary. My name's Erin Burt, and I'm the Director of Admissions on our Richmond campus, and I'm joined here tonight by a number of different people from all sorts of departments at the seminary. So I'm going to let folks introduce themselves. If we can start with Dean Ken Mcfadden.
Hi, I'm Ken Mcfadden. I'm Vice President for Academic Affairs and Academic Dean for the Richmond campus. I've been on the faculty for nearly 22 years and find it a deep joy and privilege to be able to work with faculty and students and staff in relation to a number of degree programs, including the Doctor of Ministry degree program.
All right. How about you, Dean Boyce?
Yes, my name's Richard Boyce, and I'm Academic Dean and Vice President on the Charlotte Extension campus. I'm also Associate Professor of Preaching and Pastoral Leadership. I'm a double graduate of Union Seminary, D.Min and PhD in Old Testament, but I get to teach preaching, worship, pastoral care, and polity in Charlotte. And this program's a strong connection with practice and congregational ministry makes me excited to be engaged in this program and teaching some of the classes that this program entails. So welcome tonight.
Thank you. We're also thankful to be joined by a third faculty member, Dr. Voles. Will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Rich Voles. I'm the Associate Professor of Preaching and Worship. I am in my 6th year, and I am currently teaching a D.Min course called Preaching for Transformation. So I've had a really wonderful time this semester with our D.Min students from the Richmond campus, and really glad to be here and talk about our D.Min program.
Thank you. So I'm also thankful to be able to introduce my counterpart on the Charlotte campus. Lisa McLennan, will you introduce yourself to us?
Sure. Thanks, Erin. My name is Lisa McLennan, and I am an MDiv graduate of the Charlotte campus and now serve there as the Director of Admissions, and look forward to working with those of you who are prospective students.
And last but certainly not least, we have some current students on our call tonight to add to the conversation. Veronica, will you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Veronica Cannon. I am pastor at First Presbyterian Church in Waxhaw. I am an MDiv graduate of Union, and I am now a D.Min student also at Union.
Thank you. And how about you, Beth?
Good to see you all. I am a 2nd year student with the D.Min program. I did my MDiv at Wake Forest, and I can say that I have Dr. Volz as a professor right now, and look forward to telling you a little bit more from a student's perspective about that class, but glad to be with you all.
Great. Well, let's go ahead and get started with some kind of general information. Dr. Mcfadden, will you talk a little bit about the D.Min program goals for the group?
Thank you. I'd be happy to do that. Our D.Min curriculum is fairly new. For a number of years, we had a Doctor of Ministry program that was located only on the Richmond campus, and I actually directed that program from when I arrived until the year 2012, when the last student completed the program. The program then sat for a few years, and when the faculty began to re-envision the program, there were several decisions that the faculty made. One was that the whole faculty would buy into the program, that it would not only focus on practical theology, but that it would draw together all of our faculty across our various theological departments and disciplines. So that has deepened and enriched the learning experience for our students. Another thing we decided in terms of the focus of the program was to think more intentionally and more deeply about what it means to be the church in its many shapes and forms, and what it means to be in the world in various cultural contexts, plural, that do impact the church, even as the church impacts those cultural contexts. So as a result, we have shaped this new degree program as a way that we want students to be able to articulate deeper and more advanced understandings of the contemporary church, the emerging church, and how various expressions of culture are engaging the church in its emerging and historic forms. We also want our students to be able to deepen their capacities to express practices of ministry around public voice in relation to some of the church's ministries that focus on social justice. Some of those practices would include proclamation and pastoral care. Others would focus on faith formation and Christian education. Others might focus on ecumenical partnerships and relations and interfaith partnerships and relations. And other students and degree program goals focus on what does it mean to organize communities that can help facilitate and enact social justice and social change. I think a third area that we've tried to refine in this new curriculum is to help students deepen their ability and capacity to become theologically reflective in the various practices of ministry. Our students have developed much experience in many gifts and skills for ministry through their experiences in a variety of ministry contexts. Sometimes, however, there's not time to step back and think more deeply, pastorally and theologically and ethically about what it means to be in ministry and the church in various contexts. So we want to facilitate our students' growth and development in those areas of theologically reflective practice.
Great. Does anybody else from our panel want to chime in about program goals or elaborate a bit further?
Just a quick comment. What excites me about this program is, as Ken mentioned, it engages the whole faculty, which enables the participants to come at this intersection of church and the world from a variety of angles. If your interest is Bible or theology or educational pedagogy, preaching, worship, community organizing, nonprofits, you can come at this program from a host of different directions, but all of them need to be engaged in this intersection between church and the world. We're trying to talk about practices. They may be contained within the programs and the worship of a congregation, but we want to reflect on how those programs push out and extend God's reign in the world. So I like the way that in some ways it's across our disciplines, but with a single focus on challenging us to move outside of our congregations or our ministry settings and contexts and into the world.
And from a student perspective, I'll just add that the focus on church and the world makes the program extremely relevant. I didn't mention this before, but I'm the chaplain at Chatham Hall, a boarding school in Chatham, Virginia. And so I'm dealing with youth who don't have a lot of background and experience with church, even though we're an Episcopal school. And I think that's very representative of the world. So the way that the UPSM program is able to really think about not only what is the church, but how are we reframing the church to meet the needs of God's people today is extraordinary to participate in.
I've been grateful to see the variety of folks like yourself, Beth, that are coming at this from so many different angles and different disciplines with different long-term outcomes for this program. So I'm glad y'all are highlighting that tonight. So when we're thinking about, like you're talking about, there's all of these people coming from different perspectives with different long-term goals from their D.Min, and yet we have this established as a cohort model. Dean Boyce, would you mind talking a little bit more about what that cohort model means and its value for this program?
Yes, Aaron, thank you. I mean, I'm excited as a member of the faculty to be a part of this program, and I hope I bring some expertise within my areas to the teaching and learning that goes on. But a lot of the teaching and learning that occurs in this program is among the cohort. We have an intentional model of recruiting and admitting a diverse cohort. So large and small congregations, traditional ministry, non-traditional ministry, variety of racial and ethnic backgrounds. So the discussion within the cohort is stimulating, hard to manage, and exciting. I just think it's one of the most challenging, provocative and educational context for me because of the dynamism of these cohorts. And the cohorts begin together and flow through the first full year absolutely in lockstep, and then through a lot of our electives. You'll get to the details later, and it's only with the integrative project that they begin to disperse, but they will come back and present the fruits of their studies to one another. So you'll be with this group for 3+ years and get to know one another on a pretty profound level.
Dr. Voles, will you talk a little bit about how you see that playing out in your classrooms?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the classroom this semester, I believe I have 9 of the 10 D.Min students, in addition to a few MDivs and a THM student, who are all learning together and learning with and from one another. And so, you heard Dean Mcfadden as he was speaking about the program, our decision to share it among the whole faculty. And a smaller cohort, rather than taking tons and tons of students, make sure that we really get to give students individual attention, and that we get to spread that around the whole faculty, which really, generates learning. It generates interdisciplinary learning among the whole faculty and among students. And we just had our intensive week here a few weeks ago. Due to COVID, it was our Richmond cohort's first time on campus. And so it was fun to see them be in person for the very first time with one another, and build on those relationships that they had begun in very distanced ways and online ways through their learning so far. So the cohort model just enriches lifelong learning and enriches supportive relationships. We know that ministry can be very lonely. And so those supportive relationships make a huge difference in the work that they're doing and where they will go from when they finish.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing to think about what unexpected results may have come from that during COVID, a time when we really need to lean into these relationships and collegiality. Would anybody else like to speak to the cohort model? All right. Well, let's go ahead and dive into some of the logistics of how this program works and what it means to add this program into your life. So, Ken, will you speak a little bit to the curriculum and the timeline for this program? How does this look for the timeline of the D.Min?
Sure. Thank you, Aaron. The first year is fairly structured. All of our incoming students enter as a cohort with the value that's been described into 2 courses in the fall term. One of those courses looks at what it means to be the church. For the first few years, there's been a focus on ecclesiology because the professor who has taken the lead with that course has been a missiologist on our faculty. One of the benefits of having all of our faculty involved on both campuses is Professor Skreslet has offered that course both on the Charlotte campus and on the Richmond campus. So there's been a wonderful threading of faculty to support the program wherever it's offered. The other course in the fall is one that Dean Boyce and Professor Rodney Sadler have co-taught that looks at what does it mean to be in the world and the church in the world. And given their own interest and passions and convictions around preaching and proclamation and biblical interpretation and social justice making, that enlivens students who are also thinking about what is the nature and purpose of the church and its ministry. So those 2 courses comprise that fall term learning experience that does set the table, so to speak, for what students can experience moving on through the program as they continue to think about what does it mean to be in a church context broadly defined, a ministry context, a nonprofit context that is faith-based, but also engaging various contextual and cultural realities. In the spring of the first year, students then move from those courses into 2 courses. One is an online research methods course. It's taught online with the exception of coming to the campus at the end of the spring term to present for the cohort what you have learned, so that it's a way to draw that cohort back together to share what is being learned, what is being developed in the mini project, and to get some wonderful input and support and encouragement. Some students with that mini project are already thinking about the final project. Others have just wanted to do something that is more immediate and short term, and they have something else in mind for the final project. But the beauty for me of that spring term is concurrently students are doing the online research methods course while they're doing the research and analysis for their mini project. And so most of the work is being done at home, but using various technologies to connect with library staff, with instructor, with peers, with instructors, supervisors for the mini projects. So that course dynamic has worked very, very well. In fact, the research methods course over time has been refined to make sure that it is supporting the students in their individual project work. So students, for example, in that spring term have a chance to work with a designated librarian or two who can be conversation partners as they're learning about various digital technologies that were not as accessible or available 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago, depending upon how long they've been out of a theological library. The second year then, students begin to move into their elective work, and they'll do 4 courses ordinarily during the second year that actually may begin in the summer, immediately after that first year, where students have a number of choices across campuses to work with our faculty in areas of interest to them. Since our cohorts only have 10 students per year, we don't offer 20 electives. That would be nice, and students would have more choice. But part of what we try to do is to look at the needs of the students, the interest of the faculty, the degree program goals, and where we think are some of the pressing points and pressure points for the church in various cultural contexts. So students have some choices in the elective work that they can take. Some of our students may actually opt to participate on one of our domestic or international travel seminars, and that's available to our Doctor of Ministry students. And it's a way to think about faith communities and ministries and churches and nonprofits in other cultural contexts, whether in the US or abroad. And after that second year of elective work, students then move into the final phase, the final year, or perhaps 2 of their program, where they're working on that final integrative project. It's a way for them to work much more deeply with a faculty supervisor and then subsequently with a second reader who can offer some additional input on an area of interest and passion for them and for their ministry context. It's a chance to dig deeper, and it's a chance to make a meaningful contribution, not only to the cohort, but to the church or the ministry context in which a student serves. So in some ways, that's the flow of the program. We're excited that in the next spring, a few of our Charlotte students may be in a position to complete the program. And Dean Boyce would be in a much better position to talk about those elements of the program and as students move into that third year of the program, building upon the first 2.
Thank you for that. A different angle on a similar question is, can you explain a little bit more about what this looks like in terms of time requirements? So I know we're going to get into at a later point the differences between the Charlotte and Richmond campus, but when it comes to in-person or online synchronous learning versus asynchronous, and what the workload looks like in terms of independent learning outside of the classroom.
Let me tackle first the sort of modalities there. Of course, the truth is in March of 2020, this became an all-distance program, as everything did in the seminary. That's why we're celebrating the fact that Beth's cohort got to see one another in person. So that was a pivot for all of us, and the D.Min program's been a part of that pivot. But the 2 programs are set up differently in terms of the flow of in-person and distance learning. Aaron's going to come to this again later, but the Charlotte program's set up to be primarily for folks who can drive to that campus on a periodic basis. So we initially set it up with, I think we had 4 in-person visits. We've now, y'all note we're refining this program as we go along, but we now this fall required our students to be with us for 2 days at the beginning of the program in August, and then 2 days towards the end of the program. We've just finished that. A Thursday and a Friday is when we've scheduled it. So you'll have one overnight stay, and then the rest of the course takes place via distance, either synchronously on certain designated dates or through asynchronous discussion and sharing online. The Richmond program, because of the availability of housing on that campus and the patterns of the residential program there, has an intensive gathering, which Rich just referred to, that is taking place. So you come in for a week with the hopes that people might be able to fly in or drive in from a greater distance for that 1 week journey, rather than coming back and forth periodically. This is a graduate level program, and it is demanding, and it's not simply, I think, as Beth and Veronica will tell you, it's not just showing up at class or even making a couple of comments on a Blackboard conversation thread. There's lots of reading, there's lots of writing, there's lots of sharing as a cohort. We are deeply aware that all of you are engaged in the practice of ministry in a host of contexts, but we're also determined that this will be a program that will push you and push us at the graduate level of reflection and practice.
And from a student perspective, I found the balance is great. Veronica, you might be working as well. We have found that we are able to work and also maintain the program, and also give the time that's required to be able to learn to think more deeply, more critically. So we're not just encountering things on a surface level or even on an expected level. The professors are great at helping us as a cohort learn from each other and challenge each other to think about, well, what is the real meaning of this? So that not just in our own circles, we understand each other intuitively, but we are able to defend our positions and acknowledge those positions in circles where we would encounter other people and draw them to the ministry.
Yes, and I would also add to that in this program, as a cohort, the beauty of it is that we do learn from one another. The work of the program is very intensive. There's a lot of reading, as Richard Boyce has expressed. There's a lot of reading, a lot of writing, but it does help to enrich very early on. It does help to enrich your understanding of what it means to be the church and what it means to be the church in the world, understanding that how we do church here in America is not how people do church around the world, and that we need to be sensitive not only to the way we do church here in America, because even here we don't do it the same way, but to be sensitive to not only one another here, but sensitive to the way church is enacted, or how people worship in other countries as well. But it is very intense, but I think it also does set the path for what it is will be done. I just finished the first semester, or finishing up the first semester. I'm not quite done yet, but I think it's setting the groundwork for the work that we're going to be engaging in the years to come.
Thank you all for that insight. I think it helps to get both the faculty and current student perspectives on that question, because we're all kind of living into that question. And as has already been mentioned, figuring out exactly what this works as in response to a new program, and also a new program in a pandemic. Let's move on to talk a little bit more about the role of each student's ministry context in connection to this program. Dr. Voles, I see you nodding your head. Will you start with that question?
Yeah, I think I probably want to connect the previous question to this one. So in our intensive week, which was 3 weeks ago, something around that now, time is flying by. Our students came and made presentations about stuff that they've been working on for the first half of the semester. And each presentation was based out of their own context. And so tying just a few things together here, We have a cohort of people who are not just pastors in congregations or associate pastors in congregations, but people like Beth, who's a chaplain in a school. We've got a chaplain in a health system. So we've got people who are coming from different angles of ministry. And at least from my perspective, the work that they're doing, whether that's reflecting deeply theologically, I want them to center their own context and to be able to share out of their own learning from that context. And in that exchange, what happened was, in terms of the intensive week, we began to see the work that we've been doing from different angles, right? So those who were primarily in congregational ministry heard the chaplain speak and speak about hospital system, and were able to see some of the material we were talking about from different angles that illuminated their own context and the work that they've been doing on their own. So I think we center very much ministry context in terms of the teaching and learning that goes on in the D.Min program.
Dean Boyce, Dean Mcfadden, do you all have anything to add about the importance of the current ministry context?
Just quickly, I'm thinking, Veronica, of our last gathering, and just the sort of push and pull within the cohort, ministers located in fairly affluent and moderate to conservative settings versus ministers, educators, associates located in much different context, and the sort of caution, perhaps, paralyzing caution sometimes coming out of one context, and deep urgency and immediacy coming out of the other context. How do you balance, or do you try to balance, or what can we learn from members of the cohort that are in very different sociological contexts about proclamation ministry programs? I just think the richness of the diversity pushes us in ways that I think are, in Veronica, our last gathering, sometimes painful and personal ways. We are learning from one another.
I think I would want to add that a ministry context is a significant curricular resource for the D.Min program. The D.Min program is not focused on books, although it includes books or other research materials. The person of the minister, in whatever way, shape that identity and practice takes form, and the context in which they serve, are significant parts of the curricular resource for the classroom. And so when a D.Min student is doing the work, they're not only doing the work with the hands in writing or typing or texting, they're not only using the mind, which they also need to use the mind to read challenging materials and to think about how to respond to those verbally and in writing, but it engages the heart. It engages the soul and the passion, because it is grounded in ministry experience and ministry context. So the beauty of it and the power of it is how it does engage in such a meaningful, threaded way, experience in the world with engagement with peers and professors in classrooms. It's a dynamic program by design.
I have appreciated the creativity of the professors through the program, especially in light of the relevance of what we're doing and how to draw the strengths of the different cohort together. So just in a recent assignment, Dr. Volz challenged us to think about where do we personally fall as ministers? Are we more prophetic, or do we tilt more towards the pastoral side? And it was really interesting to think about that in the context of practicing ministry, which the D.Min is centered upon. At the MDiv level, we're thinking about, well, who do we want to be as ministers? And now that we're in the D.Min program, it's who are we, and how can we continue to refine and experience ministry in a way that's prophetic as well as pastoral. So I have appreciated the way in which the assignments are bringing ministry to light in terms of how we are performing that and how we can learn from each other who are very different than what we do. So thank you for your creativity.
It's exciting to hear more about this from all of these different angles. I cannot wait to hear more about the integrative projects that come out of this program. Dr. Boyce, will you speak a little bit more about Dr. Mcfadden, will you speak a little bit more about the integrative projects? Perhaps share some ideas that you see coming out and what these projects might look like for folks.
So I will start, and then I would like to defer to Dean Richard Boyce, who is actually working with some project designs for students who are on the Charlotte campus. The D.Min project the integrative project is one that really calls for the student to think about the impact and contribution they want to make to the ministry context in which they serve. So again, what is that burning question? What is the opportunity? What is the challenge? What is the crisis? What is the problem in its context? And how has the student's evolving understanding of the church in its context or the ministry in its context, how does that advanced understanding help the student think about what they want to do in research and reflection and planning that has an impact? So it's not a theoretical dissertation, it's not a theoretical project, but it engages deep practices of ministry that may be transformative for the life of people in the faith community, for the structures of the church or the nonprofit or the chaplaincy. The impactfulness cannot be underestimated. The D.Min Integrative Project, I think, as some have already alluded to, is a place where students are going to be doing deep research. That can become very lonely because at that point, the student is not responding to written and writing assignments from the professors. They're not gathering a few times during the term as a cohort to discuss that. They're more working independently, or I would say interdependently, with their project supervisor, and if they choose, with their peers. So that to me is where the cohort becomes even more important, because the students who do not gather but continue to support each other in that project development and writing phase becomes very, very important. The D.Min Integrative Project in some ways is a capstone for the program. It's a way for the students to pull together a number of things that they are learning and they want to continue to learn beyond the completion of the degree. So Dean Boyce may have some examples or ideas out of some of the situations that have evolved and are evolving in Charlotte.
Yeah, I can't wait to see some of these projects come to fruition. And just let me give you a little sort of sampling of the wild variety we're talking about. I'm looking at some of my notes. We have a fairly statistic heavy project on mainline compensation, in clergy compensation, and new models for clergy compensation, particularly in smaller membership congregations. We have a project on theopoetics, which I'm still learning about, but includes public performances and even protest as ways of extending the proclamation of the church out into the world. We have a project on trauma in the African American church and worship and spiritual practices as a means of providing healing there. We have a project on burnout among female clergy, particularly when they reach some of the higher levels, so to speak, of senior ministry within mainline churches. We have someone who's writing, in some ways, a story about a prisoner on the theme of forgiveness, but reflecting on forgiveness as embodied in the life of a prisoner and the family that were victims of a crime that he encountered in his ministry. So it's all over the place. And to see these D.Min students exploring deep and profound theological, biblical, practical problems from within their context that reflect their own God-given passions and gifts is just exciting. And I think some of these projects are going to become profound resources for ministry moving forward. So just you wait. We may have 4 of them available by April of 2022. And then from here on out, each cohort is going to be producing more of these. So I'm so excited about the final products that come from this program.
It sounds to me to be the demonstration of what I keep hearing throughout this conversation is the personalized nature of this program, the communal nature of this program, and the contextualized nature of it, which I think is going to have some really exciting results. Dean Boyce, while you're talking at large about programs and where this has gone, now that we've done some of the back and forth between having cohorts in Richmond and having cohorts in Charlotte, will you talk about what some of the differences in being in one cohort versus the other might be?
I'm not sure that I have taught, Rodney and I have had the privilege of teaching the foundational course for all 3 cohorts thus far. So I've gotten to meet all of them coming in. I think it's going to be interesting to see how they may vary in rich ways as they proceed through this program. But again, it's more my observation. It's less differences within the cohorts. I mean, I think each cohort reflects an incredible variety of context and gifts. It's really less a difference in the cohorts and the actual learning as it is simply a difference in the ways we gather and perhaps the different groups that may be able to access the program because of that. Again, the Charlotte program's a little more regional, and we build that in through allowing more regular in-person contact there. But in the Richmond program, hopefully has a wider draw because of the housing and residential and intensive. But I must say, I've experienced the same kind of dynamism in all 3 cohorts. I think it's simply based on your location and distance from Richmond and Charlotte, which one best fits your travel and your scheduling.
So I think we should turn back to our current students that are on this call. Veronica and Beth, we'd love to hear some more about your experiences, some of the highlights that you've had so far, and maybe I'll start with just that. If you'll tell us more about your experiences in the program at this moment. Veronica, can we start with you?
Sure. I'm just completing my very first semester, so I'm not as far into the program as Beth is. However, I do think that what I have, my experience has been very rich. We've had very intense, strong conversations on Blackboard when we've met in person. We've also had very good conversations, not only with our professors, but with one another. And Richard mentioned just a little while ago about one of the last times we met in person. We just had a very rich conversation about some things that happened in class where I felt personally convicted on some things that happened that came out of the discussions from the day before that I was wrestling with. And when I brought those things before the class, they also wrestled with some of those same issues along with me from different perspectives, but we were able to actually flesh some things out, and people were able to make some confessions and some admissions, and walking alongside of one another. And it was very rich conversation. So I think the culmination of everything that happened throughout the entire semester between both classes, because I also found that there was some intersectionality between the two classes that was also very rich. But I think that because we were able to work through many of these things together, when we got to the end and had this discussion, it really kind of opened up discussion for everybody in the classroom. And so I found that to be very, very valuable. I was stretched. I think other people in the class were stretched, and we were able to have some very open and honest conversations that was reflective of some of the readings and the conversations that we'd had throughout the semester.
Real quickly, Aaron, there is a courage and a confidence among these D.Min students. I don't want to impugn in any way our MDiv and MACE, because many of them are deeply experienced practitioners as well. But that confidence and sense of self and courage to step up and talk about very difficult topics, as I said, makes this a scary, exciting, and profoundly transformative learning experience, I believe, for me, and I believe for our students as well.
It's always wonderful when you have those moments where you realize the faculty are also getting something out of this experience too, and have the opportunity to learn from students as well. That's one of the things I love about our community. Beth, will you tell us a little bit more about your experience?
Sure. So I'll echo everything that Veronica said. It is a deeply rich program. I would add that it's deeply personal as well. And I think that's from the cohort. I remember when I was first looking at the program and learned that the strategy was to create, a very blended kind of group. And I was really excited about that because, as someone mentioned, ministry can be lonely. And it's challenging sometimes to fail in ministry because you've got to be, you have such responsibility to community and to others. And so the cohort that I have found is deeply personal, and we are able to grow and learn together. We're able to challenge each other. We're able to be vulnerable with each other and to realize that we don't have all of the answers. And going into the program, having practiced a little bit, we come in confident, and it's a beautiful, transformative experience to be able to say, I hadn't thought about that, or I think what you're saying adds a lot of life and light to this, and I want to go in that different direction. So that's the first thing. I will say, in terms of the program, the mini project is a phenomenal aspect of the program. And it gives us students the chance to put our toe in and kind of think about, what does it mean to really do research and to come out of a world of a world based on theory and to move into a world based on data and practice. And I found that I really loved that, and I was surprised by it. But it was a relief that I told my professor to be able to lean on data rather than having to lean on my own insights or thoughts about something. So to develop the skills to be able to have a problem and then to seek data to support the findings was a skill that I had not developed yet. And I know that has transformed the way that I think about ministry and pastoral care. It changes assumptions quite a bit so that you really are trained more to be present and in the moment. So I'm very grateful for that experience, and it opened my eyes to think about, well, what could my next project be? I think that's a wonderful thing that this program does. And then the last I'll mention is it's awesome to be able to have the experience of learning from Charlotte faculty as well as Richmond. And there's a lot of crossover, and some of the courses that I've been able to take, I've gotten to know professors from Charlotte that I didn't know that I would. Dr. Davis this summer was just a phenomenal breath of fresh air, and especially her focus on Christian education was illuminating. And if we didn't have that kind of crossover with our professors in the two different campuses, I wouldn't have benefited from that. So I'm very grateful that we are able to benefit from professors on both campuses.
Thank you for those insights, Beth. Beth, will you continue on and tell us just a little bit about what your integrative project might look like, or where you think you might be headed with that? Or you could also share about your mini project, whatever you're comfortable with.
Sure. And it's fun to talk about it. So my mini project was based on trying to see the impact of daily prayer. And coming from an Episcopal school, we have chapel 3 times a week. And when I started, the students, they're required to go to chapel. And so there was a lot of grumbling about, why are we doing this and what is it all about? And then there were the alum who used to have chapel daily. And the alum's position was, 3 times a week, y'all have it easy. We should do it every day. And so I was trying to figure out, well, what would be transformative with the students? Do we need more? Do we need less? Or do we need different kind of content? So I put into place a daily program and then measured the results of that, introducing 4 different kinds of prayer, trying to embody prayer as meditation, using sacred text, interfaith text as another form of prayer and reflection, worship as we think of worship, being outside though rather than inside. So I had specific criteria, and then I measured weekly the impact of those specific practices to see, does this help? Do students feel more spiritually well? So what I learned through the process was it would have been more helpful had I been able to define more clearly what I was trying to measure at the beginning of it, not through it. So I knew what I was trying to accomplish, but I didn't have the insight to be able to say, I've got to define spiritual wellness really well and have that baseline to be able to have conclusive and generative data. So it was an awesome learning experience to go through that, where the stakes were high, but it wasn't my full project. And so I can apply all of that to the integrative project to come. So I still am not locked in completely in terms of what I want to do. I know I want to probably focus on youth again. My idea is to try to somehow capture students' thoughts on some big theological topics, and then try to try to unpack that, and then try to write about it. So one of those topics is, who is God? Another is, what is faith? Another is, what is church? And so I have 5 or 6 of these key questions that I want to ask, because I do have the benefit of 150 students that I can require to answer, and then being able to cull through all of that data and think about, well, what does this mean in terms of programming? So what I don't know is, am I looking to try to influence Christian education? Am I trying to influence church at large? So I'm not sure what that tells us yet. That's where I'm still contemplating.
Thank you for sharing. It's exciting to hear about how this might change with time, as well as just the learning process of it all. Veronica, I know that you might be still in the dreaming phase of all of this, but do you have any ideas about what you might be looking at for your mini project or your integrative project?
Well, as you've mentioned, things can change over time. And even though I have only been in this for a short period of time, it has morphed and changed a couple of times, actually, where I think my interests lie. Initially, I was thinking about doing something involving women in ministry and women empowerment. And then as I began to think about that, I started thinking in terms of doing something more along the lines of something involving pluralism. But from the last class that we had, when this discussion sort of opened up in our class, some things that I was struggling with that kind of helped other people also make some confessions and admissions and that type of thing. Anyway, I'm now thinking more along the lines of doing something involving justice issues, and I'm still fleshing that out. That's the best I can give you right now.
More to come. We'll be excited to hear where this goes, Veronica. This is great.
Thank you.
Hey, Erin, can I just add on to that, perhaps?
Yeah, please.
In terms of my role as a professor, one of the things that I hope to do and have been doing along the way in the course that I'm teaching now is to have consultations with students and ask them to think about how their work in this course might feed their project. So I hope that that's something that not just I'm doing, but all the other professors are doing to support and help build bridges toward the final project. So students aren't just doing something radically different, maybe than what they had started with, but how some of that work that we've been doing so far can feed into that project so they're not starting from scratch.
Dr. Voles, can you hang on to this concept for just a second? So for anybody who's listening in right now, we are paying attention to any questions you're putting in our chat. In a moment, we're going to shift the conversation slightly, but we'll wrap up with kind of a Q&A, so feel free to put any other questions in. One of the questions that's come up from our listeners, Dr. Voles, is that they're curious about what advisement throughout this program looks like, and if there's any sort of faculty advisor that's assigned, or who they turn to throughout the time that they're with us. So can you offer a little more insight there?
Yeah, I can try, and then maybe one or both of the deans can supplement my answer. So at the sort of top level, there are the directors of the program, and those will have supervision over the entire program and the management of the program. But every student is assigned a faculty advisor when they come in that helps them sort of make their way through the program. But as students get closer and closer to writing their project proposals, their integrative project proposals, they decide on a faculty advisor for that project. And that may or may not be the same advisor that they have at the point at which they're assigned a faculty advisor for the program when they come in. So there are sort of multiple checks and layers along the way. So our faculty are deeply involved in the life of the program. So Ken or Richard may have more to add to that or to correct me.
One sort of quick correction. The truth is we followed two different patterns on the different campuses. I probably foolishly have served as the advisor for the cohorts in Charlotte until they get up to the integrative project level, rather than having all of the faculty serve, partly because we kicked it off in Charlotte, and I think our professors were learning with us early on. But I'm hoping and praying we're transitioning to the point where we have a director of the program overall rather than the two deans carrying that. And I would assume the new director might recommend the same approach on both campuses, where from the beginning you have an individual advisor. But that's evolved in Charlotte, that I've served as the advisor in Charlotte until the point where people get to their mini projects and I try to counsel them on the right supervisor for those. And now I'm involved in helping pair up the first cohort with supervisors for the integrative project. And from that point on, you're working intensely one-on-one with various members of the faculty.
I think what I would add would be that there's a lot of mentoring that happens in many forms. So the faculty advisor can be a possible mentor for the student who's beginning the program and a wonderful conversation partner. But as the student goes through courses with professors, whether it's the first year or the second year, or with a mini project where they may have a supervisor for the mini project who's not their faculty advisor, the students are being exposed to more people who have mentoring roles to play in the student's educational program. And I think that's very rich on both campuses. So I do think that even though the student may have one assigned faculty advisor, there are a number of people who have mentoring roles for the student depending upon the student's learning goals and interest.
Thank you all for that. So we're going to shift gears, and it's my hope that tonight may have piqued your interest a little bit more, that you would be interested in applying for this program. I'll be a person who's a conversation partner for the incoming Fall 22 core cohort, and Lisa McClennan will be a conversation partner for those interested in Fall 23. And we're both hopeful just to explore what this might look like for you. So don't hesitate to reach out to either one of us. But I'm going to ask Lisa to explain a little bit more about the admissions process and what the application process looks like from here. Veronica?
Before Lisa speaks, I just want to say this has been very rich for me. I will need to leave now because I've got to conduct a Bible study. So this has been very rich, and I pray that those of you who are watching will consider the program. Thank you for inviting me to take a part.
Thank you for being a part, Veronica. We're glad to have you with us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Veronica. So I'll just, where our time is coming to a close, and I want to make sure we address any final questions in the chat feed. So I'll just give y'all sort of the important details that are the most frequently asked questions. You can find great information about the application process on our website. We have a big old apply button. You click on that and there's a lot of information there for you. The important things for you to know is that the application deadline for the fall of 22 Richmond cohort is March 15th. That is a hard deadline. We need all of your application materials by that March 15th deadline. That would include our online application, your 3 references, all of your transcripts, the criminal background check, and personal disclosure statement. Once we receive all of those materials, on March 15th, our faculty will do a preliminary review of the applications, at which time people will be invited back for interviews after that. Upon the completion of the interviews with our faculty, you could expect, if you were chosen for an interview, to have 2 faculty interviews. And then after those are done, we will get back to you with an admissions decision in early April so that you can make plans for your future theological education. Another important question we're frequently asked is about the cost. The entire degree program is $10,000. That's not a semester, that's the total cost of the degree. We do have need-based aid available for those who qualify for up to 1/3 of that cost. The way that's typically billed is it's $1,000 a class. So your first semester, if you're taking 2 classes, we're going to bill you $2,000. Additional expenses to consider would be travel, housing overnight, gas, books, and then any additional expenses related to those. And then we have a final, a small student fee each semester as well, less than $100. Lastly, I would just share with you, if you have additional questions, Erin and I, that's what we're here to do, whether it's talking about what Church in the World means for this program or technical details about your application. Our information is all over the website as well. You can text us, call us on the phone, request an appointment through a link, or just send an email to admissions@upsim.edu.
Thank you for that information, Lisa. We're going to wrap up with one question from someone in the audience right now. They're looking at using or the use or role of staff chaplains as an educational resource for CPE students. So specifically looking at theories of mentorship or preceptorship, evidence-based practices. Are these topics that we could see being as a part of a final project? Go for it.
Yeah, I'd love to respond to that. I think it's a great topic for a final project. I think of a number of areas that a student could pursue in that research. I'm thinking, for example, not only of dimensions of mentorship, but also at elements of formation and the role of various practitioners in identity formation of people in the practice of ministry. So I think both in terms of ministry and mentoring context specifically, but also in education of other professions and professionals, there's some good literature to look at in the education of the professions. So I do think that could be a very generative idea that could be very helpful in a particular context in a CPE program, for example, but also have value beyond that particular site. So Angela, thank you for that question.
I'd only add, Angela, that evidence-based practice, I believe you've already been reading our handbook there. That looks like it's right on target for what we're talking about. Thank you.
Well, thank you all so much for being a part of this evening and a lively conversation. Like Lisa already mentioned, we're hopeful to be in touch with you and to hear what this conversation might have inspired, questions that you might have, and your ideas moving forward. You can be in touch with us through our website, upsem.edu, via email at admissions, that's admissions plural, at upsem.edu. Lisa and I would love to be in touch. So please do not hesitate to reach out, and we wish you all the best. Take care.